I haven't had to sit for an exam of any significance for almost 10 years. But now, I have a personal training certification exam that I paid close to $1,000 for. My brain has not been forced to absorb a whole textbook worth of information for many years. And honestly, when I first opened the textbook for the certification exam, half the stuff might as well have been written in Greek. How do muscles contract? How high is someone's blood pressure before I need to send them off to see a doctor? It is the two things that I was absolutely horrible at: biology and memorization of facts. The passing mark is 70%, and if I failed, I would need to retake the exam in 6 months, and I would need to pay again. So I was legit under a lot of pressure to pass. Hi and welcome back. My name is Evie, and you're at the Third Spring, a place where we strive to live well and pursue our why in every season of life. In today's episode, I'd like to share with you the challenges I faced as an adult studying for a theory certification exam and the magical studying techniques I discovered that helped me go from almost certainly failing the exam to passing with flying colors at 95%. So there were 3 big challenges I had to grapple with. Firstly, the course materials were massive, but not everything would be tested. I need to optimize my studying effort so that I would know just enough, not more and not less. The second challenge is there's a deadline I set for myself. I want to finish the exam and pass it before my travel kicks in full gear. I honestly don't believe I can balance studying and traveling at the same time, so I just gotta be done with the exam as soon as possible. And the third challenge is just my retention of facts. My retention of random facts like what's the body fat percentage level for obesity is crap. So with that, I set out a plan to study. My plan is to understand the materials in each chapter by reading the textbook extensively and then making use of the revision questions to test my understanding. Sounds reasonable, right? Unfortunately, the plan quickly got derailed. Out of 8 chapters, I got stuck at chapter 2. The anatomical positions of the body in exercising. That stuff just refused to stay in my brain. With 2 weeks left until the exam, I still had 6 chapters to study, and honestly, panic was kicking in. And it was time for some desperate measures. For context, I have heard so much about studying techniques like active recall and retrospective revision schedule from watching random YouTube videos. But unfortunately, I've never really had a chance to try them out because I discovered those techniques way after I was done with formal studying. So I decided that it was time for me to just try because I was honestly at a loss of what to do. So there were 3 big things that I introduced to my study plan. Firstly, I stopped reading the textbook passively. I started directly with the questions at the end of each chapter. So at first, the question made no sense to me. I tried to guess an answer whenever I could, and then I would compare my answer with the answer key. Most of the time, they were just wrong, and I honestly felt really stupid. But the amazing thing is, true learning started when I tried to make sense of why the correct answer is so and so. For example, why is it that lateral lunge, where you shift your body weight from side to side, is very effective to help you train for going uphill? Why is it that when someone has a texting neck problem where their neck and back hunch, should focus on pulling exercises? And how is it that someone can be fit and unhealthy at the same time? By focusing on the questions at the end of the chapter, I cut out the noise and zoomed into the content that was the most relevant for the exam. The second thing that I changed in my study plan was to make use of Quizlet to quiz myself. So for all the questions I got wrong and any new concepts I discovered along the way, I created flashcards for them so that I could revise them again and again. How I revised was not by reading the cards passively. What I did is to crack my brain trying to remember what's written on the cards. For example, if the front of the flashcard asks, how should someone who wants to grow their muscles train? I will try to recall the program designed for hypertrophy in terms of training frequency. Sometimes I got it right, sometimes I didn't, but the discomfort when I tried to summon a piece of information buried deep in my brain was what made the information stick better the next time around. Even with these changes, I still spend at least an hour a day trying to create flashcards from all the new information. It was precious time that I wasted copy-pasting and reorganizing information when I could have used it for active recall. So I decided to take a leap of faith and used an AI feature within Quizlet to generate flashcards automatically. What I did is to upload the study materials to Quizlet, and they helped me generate a set of flashcards. That way, I spent less time creating the cards and more time making my brain recall the information. Of course, the flashcards are not always perfect. Sometimes they are really low quality, but 70% of the time they are decent. And if I find that there are other concepts worth memorizing, I would still manually create cards for them. So this really supercharged my study journey, like nobody's business. I could cover 1 to 2 chapters a day if I really pushed it. And this is in comparison to the beginning of my studying journey, where I got stuck with a chapter for weeks. So you could easily substitute Quizlet with any other flashcards application of your choice. Anki is one of the very popular options for doing so. I only like Quizlet because they gamify so many of my dry and boring concepts. Honestly, memorizing things like how many grams of carbohydrate does someone who is a couch potato eat a day versus an athlete is not the most interesting activity. But the jingle of a correct answer on Quizlet was really the motivation that kept me going. Last but not least, the third change I made to my study habit was a complete game changer. If you think back on your school days, have you ever revised a subject in sequence? Let's say you studied chapter 1, 2, 3, and so on, and by the time you needed to revise for an exam, you would also revise in order of chapter 1, 2, 3, and so on. I had done that my entire student life, and naturally, the chapters I studied at the beginning of the semester would have a lot more time and attention compared to the later chapters. Instead, what I should have done, which is what I did this time round, is to revise the chapters based on how confident I feel with regard to the mastering of the materials. And this is called the retrospective revision schedule and is best explained with an example. What you see on screen is an illustration of the retrospective revision schedule that I could use for the personal training certification exam. Suppose there are 4 chapters, 1 to 4, listed in column B. So the first study session that I have, I can choose to study the first chapter, Health and Physical Fitness. At the end of the study session, I would rate my confidence level. How well have I mastered the materials out of 5? So let's say I am 3 out of 5 confident about chapter 1. I would just write down on this sheet. In the next study session, I decide to move on to chapter 2, Functional Anatomy and Training Instructions. And at the end of the session, I rate my confidence to be 2 out of 5. So the third study session comes around, and now I have a choice. I could either look forward and pick a new chapter, or I could look backwards and revise a chapter that I was not very confident with. Suppose I choose to revise chapter 2, and my confidence score becomes 3 out of 5. And then the next study session comes around, and I decide to pick up chapter number 3, and let's just make some assumption that my confidence score becomes 4 out of 5. And then for nutrition, my confidence score is 3 out of 5. So at this point in time, I have studied every chapter at least once. So every time I revise, I should look backwards to see which chapter I am the least confident in. And I have 3 chapters that are ranked 3 out of 5 and 1 chapter that is ranked 4 out of 5. So I could choose one chapter that is ranked 3 out of 5, and as a rule of thumb, I should choose a chapter that I have not revised in a long time. So in this case, it could be either chapter 1 or chapter 4. So suppose I revise chapter 1 and my confidence score improved to 4 out of 5. And then I do the same thing with nutrition and my confidence really has improved to 5 out of 5. And then for chapter 2, in another study session, my revision has helped me boost my confidence to 4 out of 5. So as you can see, with this studying method, it ensures that the chapters that you feel not very confident with would get more time and attention from you instead of the traditional sequential revision order that puts a lot of emphasis on the chapters that you first study. Really, this studying method has boosted my progress like nobody's business. 2 days before the exam, I was pretty confident that I had done my best to cover all my grounds, and the final result of 95% made me very happy. I felt like as a full-time student, my studying techniques were very inefficient, and it was mind-blowing how I never bothered to find out the best technique to study. It is kind of an irony that while studying for personal training, something that seems very physical, I discovered better memorization techniques. I know as adults, we don't sit for as many exams as full-time students, but when we do, we are always in a tough spot because more often than not, adults have job and family responsibilities, and the exams that we choose to take are usually high stakes. It's probably for a career pivot or a professional certification. But we don't have all the time in the world to study. So the next time you have to take a theory certification exam, try to make use of question sets, active recall, and retrospective revision schedule. They might save you a ton of time and a ton of money. Thank you for listening. Till we meet again. Meanwhile, live well and pursue your why.